Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. And one little warning, if you have a cell phone or an electronic device, please make sure to turn off the volume. And of course, the theme today for tonight's story evening is holiday disasters. And I've been hearing that lately their holidays have become disastrous in many families. I've heard that and read that when families get together nowadays, society is so divided that people get into arguments over ideology and no longer enjoy the holidays. So our suggestion is, when you feel that coming, when there is tension, just tell stories. Make a circle and just tell stories, because that brings everyone together. And that is beyond ideology, political disagreements. Remember that. And I also want you to keep in mind that if you are inspired when you're listening to the storytellers this evening, keep in mind that after the intermission, we invite a story from the audience. So if you suddenly remember a holiday disaster of your own that you would like to share here, we would love a short story from an audience member. You can put your name in, we have a basket out there, or where you can put in your name if you have a story to share. So please keep that in mind. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Margo O'Day. And for introductions, we asked each storyteller what their favorite holiday is and why. Now, Margo said that her favorite holiday is Christmas because it's always so disastrous, the chaos. But she said, actually, when you have a big family, as she does, any holiday will lead to disaster. So she has plenty of stories about that. Please put your hands together for Margo.
Hello. So I'm the oldest of 7 children. I have 5 younger brothers and a baby sister. So every holiday has disaster written all over it. Whether it's telling your little brother that Hass and Pfeffer isn't chicken, it's really you're eating the Easter bunny. Or being chased by the cops because your drunk brother decided to dress like Frankenstein and chase children through the park. But the biggest ones for me was Christmas time. As the oldest of 7, it's assumed that, and being the only girl, you're going to be a babysitter, which I was. And we moved to Jones Hill. My father moved us into a 1-room schoolhouse on 3 acres of land, which didn't please my German mother at all. And her only thing was, Donald, you need to put an addition on, and I want you to build me a fireplace. My father was a bricklayer. And so he got the addition on because he used to work on weekends, and he'd barter for stuff. Like, I'll build you this wall if you give me 10 sheets of plywood. The addition got built. Not so much the fireplace, and then, with luck would have it, the town of Lebanon burnt down. So, my father was working on rebuilding, and he says, what are you guys doing with all these bricks? Well, we're going to bury them. I'll take them home. He had unpaid labor at home. He had 5 kids. So we spent a year, and he bricked our entire house. There was black granite in the front of Woolworths, and he took the black granite, and that's what he built my mother her fireplace with. He put a big fireplace in the basement, turned it into a family room, and in our family, it's like, really, we need a family room? But my mother had this vision. We're gonna have Christmas there, we're gonna have the fireplace. It's okay. And I was like pretty skeptical because, hello, 4 boys running around loose by a fire. It just isn't going to be good. So they had the TV down there, and the year before, I'd always doubted Santa Claus because I never could quite see it. I'm a pretty realistic person. And I learned to read. I don't even remember not reading. So I asked my mother. My mother had grown up during the war. She didn't put up with any, there was no fantasy in her head. She said, I just got these encyclopedias from the Red and White. She used to get them, 50 cents a week, you got one book. She goes, look up St. Nicholas. We're up to the S's anyway. So I looked it up and I found out Santa Claus isn't real. And I said, okay, that's a good little thought to keep in the back of the head against the brothers. So my parents went Christmas shopping. At the age of 12, they thought I was a suitable person to watch these boys. My sister was a baby, so they took her with, they didn't trust me with her. So we're downstairs, we're watching, anybody remember Burl Ives? Big fat guy? He was on TV, and he was wearing a suit, and he's fat. And my brothers were all excited. They're like, he's gonna come down the chimney, he's Santa Claus, he's gonna come down the chimney, he's gonna bring presents. And by this point, I was like, no, we're done with this. My brothers looked at me as being the Wicked Witch of the West. And they were my flying monkeys. So I told them, there's no Santa Claus. And they looked at me like, no, there's Santa Claus because he's on TV. I said, no, that big fat guy ain't coming down the chimney. So the boys were like, yes, he is. I said, go look. My father hadn't quite finished off the chimney yet, so the flue was closed. So they go look, they go, yeah, he can fit. And I'm like, boy, you guys are stupid. And I said, okay, he can fit down that chimney. Okay, we're gonna go look on the roof. And it had snowed a little bit, but my father had a ladder because he couldn't start the chimney, we couldn't start the fire until he capped the roof, the chimney. So I figured there's a little porch and then the chimney. I said, I'll get him up there and show him. So we're out there, they're in their pajamas, and there was a ladder. So I made all four of them. They're standing on that roof, and I'm down there and said, now get up and on the chimney and look down the chimney. Tell me some fat guy can fit down there. So as they were making their way up to the roof, they said, well, I said, the reindeer are as big as cows. 8 cows on the roof just isn't gonna make it. And by now, they're all crying, so I'm pretty happy. And then I saw the lights coming up the hill because we lived on top of a hill. And I knew my father's truck, and I knew the sound, and I could hear him coming. So I told my brothers, get off the roof. But we're gonna check and see if, and I said, oh no, you're gonna get off the roof, Mom and Dad are coming. They didn't quite make it. And my parents pulled up, and I'm standing there, and it wasn't good. Let's just say it wasn't good. But of course, by then they're all crying, and they're asking my mother about Santa Claus. And my mother's looking at me, she goes, can you ever shut your mouth? Ever. And I said, well, I figured I'd tell them the truth eventually. No. But then becoming a babysitter for me was a money-making deal. And we were all very resourceful. We picked berries in the summertime, had a lemonade stand. And my mother had a friend. Her name was Marlene. Marlene was rich by way of her husband, who owned a car dealership. And she had 4 rotten kids. She had Bobby, Marky, Sherry, and Pammy. And Marlene and my mother, I don't know how they became friends, because my mother's a very refined woman. She would, knit. She knit beautiful sweaters with the snowflakes and the deer, but they were always muted colors. Marlene crocheted fluorescent dresses to go over dolls that sat on her toilet paper. It's the only house I ever went into where she had a fluorescent pig head crocheted over her toaster. And she thought she was crafty, and I'm like, okay. Marlene used to come up every day in the summertime with these kids. And for some reason, she assumed I was gonna be the babysitter. And I made sure they didn't die. That was the end of it. I mean, there's 8 kids for me to watch between my brothers and them. And my brothers knew where to draw the line. These kids didn't. And my brother said, she's gonna hit you. You keep it up, she's gonna hit you. So Marlene used to come up. My mother and her would sit there. My mother would be knitting beautiful sweaters and stuff, getting ready for winter. Marlene would be crocheting away ugly things. They'd be smoking their cigarettes, drinking coffee, and watching soap operas. The World Turns, and Dark Shadows was the favorite. So I'd babysit for Marlene once in a while. I'd get through it, be okay, $10, thank you, goodbye. Came Christmas time, and Marlene needed me to stay overnight. And I said, okay, well, you know, those 4 kids and me overnight wouldn't really work out. She said, I'll give you $25. I said, so, I'll do it. So Marlene's house was like a discotheque threw up. Because she went in and she crafted everything. There's all these creepy things. Everything, you know, toilet paper is covered with crochet, baskets, the whole house. You know, she put up, they used to have beer cans, you pull the top out. She made curtains with them. So it's Christmas time, so the house is way over the top. She has lights everywhere. I go to the living room, and it's the first time I'd ever seen a fake silver tree. It looked like tinfoil that someone had just cut up, and it was everywhere, plus all the lights all over it. And she says, you're going to stay in my craft room. And I said, okay, because she put a little bed in there for me. And I went in, and this whole wall, it was stacked with presents, like billions of them. And I'm like, okay, well, whose presents are those? She goes, those are for the kids. I'm going to give you $10 if you wrap these presents. And I hated these kids. I mean, I was doing this for the money. That was it. And I'm thinking about it. I said, $10, okay. And I'll make $35. I said, all right. So this was Saturday, which gave me 2 days. I'll be good. And these kids got into everything. These kids would go down in the morning and eat anything in sight and leave it everywhere, and I was constantly cleaning. I don't like to clean. I made my brothers clean. That was the whole point to being the oldest. And so after a hard weekend with them, I forgot I got to wrap all these presents. And Marlene had said, okay, Pammy gets this color, Bobby gets this color. And I was like, okay. She goes, I put little signs on each one of them. Apparently, she had used cheap tape because all the signs had fallen off. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I bribed the kids. I said, okay, stay in your rooms for 2 hours. I figured in 2 hours I might get this done. And I started wrapping. At this point, I really didn't care. I wrapped all the presents. I put whatever names were on them. Didn't care who got what. Put them under the tree. Marlene and Bob come home from their little vacation. She pays me. I go home. I'm good. And I do not have a guilty conscience whatsoever. I don't care that Pammy was getting a truck. I don't care that Bobby was getting a doll. So Christmas Day comes. We celebrate Christmas Eve because we're German. They celebrate Christmas morning. So it got to be about 11 o'clock and his phone call. And my mother goes, stop yelling, Marlene. Oh, you want to talk to Margo? And I'm like, okay. So Marlene's on the phone. She's yelling and screaming. She's Italian, so she's like screaming a lot. A lot. And I said, if you didn't have such rotten kids that I had to take up all my time watching them, she goes, that's what I paid you for. I said, no, but you included, we did the wrapping and everything else. Well, why couldn't you get the names? I said, if you didn't buy such cheap tape, they might have gotten the right presents. So at that, I hung up on her. And she called back. I said, Margo, what? Can you babysit this weekend? I'll pay you. I'll pay you $30. And I said, if there's no wrapping involved, I'll do it.
Thank you, Margo. Our next holiday disaster is from Lianne Moccia, who is actually with us on the organizing team for the Mudroom. And when we asked Lianne what her favorite holiday is, she said actually she doesn't need holidays because what she prefers over anything else is to just get together with friends for a relaxed dinner without all the stress of a holiday. And we have a story about a pretty stressful dinner, I think. Please welcome Lianne.
I'm one of the loud Italians that Margo just mentioned. When I was growing up, every single holiday was spent with my large extended family. So my mom and her two sisters would get together a few days before whatever holiday it was, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and they would begin a cooking extravaganza. They made incredible Italian delicacies, and I never saw a recipe. I never even saw a measuring cup. It was kind of seamless. You know, they would just produce homemade ravioli or eggplant parmesan, maybe roll out the dough and make lasagna, fry cannoli on little metal rods and fill it with ricotta cheese. And believe me, we had Italian food at every holiday. There was a slight nod to Thanksgiving. There was a turkey, but nobody really ate it. And we tried ham once with the little pineapple rings and the cherry from the Betty Crocker, and nobody ate that. So we just had this big crowd. Nobody had a house big enough for all of us to be in one room, so there would be the real table and the kids' table, and I was always in charge of the kids' table, which was not that much fun, and we would be in the hall or in the kitchen. And the holidays were the same. My Uncle Mario was at the head of the table with his shirt sleeves rolled up, and he was toasting with one wine from this part of Italy or remembering another relative in another part of Italy. And, you know, it was loud, delicious, and kind of crazy, but it was pretty familiar. I mean, that's what we did all the time. Well, when it came time for me to leave home, well, time for me to go to college, I decided to leave home. I was the first girl in my extended family to go away to school. And instead of staying home and going to teacher's college, I went to New York City because I thought that would be pretty great. My parents were terrified. I was a little terrified myself, but it was the end of the 60s. I went to the Bronx. I was at Fordham University, and my parents thought maybe the Jesuits would be a good influence. Wrong. So there was a lot going on. Anti-war activity, you know, Vatican II, folk masses. And I fell in with a bunch of friends, and we noticed that there were tons of people in our neighborhood in the Bronx who were homeless, hungry, passed out. So we decided to open up a soup kitchen. So we found an empty storefront. We didn't ask anybody's permission. We just took it over. We got some metal tables, some folding chairs, and 3 or 4 long lengths of extension cord, which we ran together and pirated electricity from a building a couple of blocks away. We had 2 hot plates and 1 coffee urn. And if we plugged everything in at the same time, the lights would go out. And then we'd have to go into the basement where there were rats and replace the fuse. It was pretty grim. We were in an area of the Bronx near Arthur Avenue, which is now a real foodie place to eat. But at the time, it wasn't like that. But we would go there and beg for old food, leftover food, a little money, and whatever we got, which was pretty awful, we would make on a hot plate and serve people. And our people were mostly men, although a few women, and they were junkies, actively shooting up, or on methadone, or mixing it all up, taking Tuinol, Seconal, nodding off in the soup kitchen. It was quite a scene, especially for me, this like young 19-year-old who hadn't seen much of the world. So it was October, beginning of November, and we decided we would have a Thanksgiving meal. This was going to be beautiful. We're going to bring a lot of people together and have a meaningful holiday. Somebody's laughing already. So we couldn't cook in the soup kitchen. We didn't even have a stove. So we found a church in the Bronx that would let us be there for the day of the event, and we could cook some of the stuff there. We went around and begged. That was before it was called fundraising, and we got money, and we bought some turkeys, and we decided that 6 or 7 of us would each take a turkey home, and if we had an oven, and if we had a pan big enough, And if we didn't, we cut it in half. So the plan was on Thanksgiving Day, people would be baking the turkeys, and somebody would be at the church making potatoes and squash. And I somehow ended up as the authority on making the special part of the meal, which was going to be bread and pies. Homemade bread, homemade pies. What could be hard, right? Yeah. So we got the use of the Jesuit seminarian's stainless steel, pristine industrial kitchen. I mean, it was phenomenal. And all of a sudden, I was at the table, and all the people were saying, okay, you know, how do you make bread? And I was like, can't be hard, right? So before the internet, before YouTube, I just had a piece of paper that said a couple of words I didn't understand. One was proof the yeast, and the other one was knead, the dough. I didn't know what either of those things meant, but you know, I sort of mixed up the yeast with a little water, and then I put the flour in, and then I smashed this thing around the table. It said 5 minutes. I was like, I guess that's it. Tried to look competent. And I said, well, these are going to be free-form loaves. So I made 2 kind of balls and put those in the oven. And my friend Charlie decided that he was going to take a little bread dough and he was going to craft a braided cornucopia. He was just like you saw in those Hallmark cards, you know, the interwoven horn of plenty with, he said, we'll fill it up with gourds. It'll be the centerpiece for the table. I was like, oh, that's touching. So while the bread was baking, we came to pie. So we had filling, but my job was to teach everybody how to make a pie crust. What could be so hard? So it says, you know, you cut the shortening into the flour and then add as little liquid as possible. And the secret was don't really handle the dough. So I didn't, and I had a mass of crumbs all over the table, so I smashed them back up together, and I poured in a little bit more water, and then I started smashing it. I think I was getting the hang of kneading at this point. So I was really like pushing that stuff down. After about the 8th or 10th attempt, I had a leather-like circle that I slapped into a pie pan and said to my students, okay, folks, have at it. And somehow, we made 20 pies. Meanwhile, the bread comes out of the oven, and it was a cannonball. I mean, it was, I couldn't cut it, we certainly couldn't eat it, so we had to move to plan B. So plan B was, I borrowed a car, because I didn't have a vehicle, and I was going to drive to Pathmark, which was like the cheapest New York grocery store, to buy dinner rolls. So I had to make my way to the other side of the Bronx. I went to Pathmark, I bought 40 bags of dinner rolls, I put them in the back of the car, and I start driving back over to Fordham, and I hear, and I'm like, geez, the cops. Although I didn't say cops. In those days, they had another name for law enforcement. And I'm like, shit, they're on my tail because I'm an anti-war activist. We pull over, and he's like, okay, where's your license and registration? So I show him my license, no registration. I don't even know who the car belongs to, so there's no registration. And he leans in and he says, what do you got in the back of that car? And I'm thinking, thank God it's not draft files. We just stolen. I say 30 loaves, packages of dinner rolls, officer. He gives me a citation, and he says, you report to traffic court next week. I'm like, oh God. So I get in the car, I drive back over. So we've got the rolls, we've got the turkeys cooking. We have plastered, mimeographed signs all over telephone poles because we have to get people to come to this dinner. So all over the Bronx, the machine with the blue spirit that you kind of get drunk on. Phew. So we had free, Thanksgiving meal, come join us, all over the Bronx, but we really didn't know if anybody was going to come. So we coordinate, we get the vegetables there, we get the turkey, some of them are raw, some of them are burned, some of them are cut in half. And we've got tables set up, and we have paper tablecloths, and paper plates, and we had some plastic bags, and we thought maybe we'd have a little bit of stuff left over, and we had the cornucopia, which was kind of wanky, with little gourds coming out. I don't know if we actually held hands and sang Kumbaya, but we probably did. It was that kind of a feeling. This was just going to be such a day. Oh. So we're getting ready. We open the door, and a horde, stampeding horde of people came in. I was overwhelmed. They just rushed in. They grabbed food. They were loading mashed potatoes into plastic bags, putting them in their coat pockets, grabbing turkey, shoving them inside their pants. I think it was 6 or 8 minutes after the doors opened that there was not a person left in the hall. It was empty. You know, there was cranberry sauce down the side of the tablecloth and a few gourds rolling across the floor. The horn of plenty was all, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's Thanksgiving. No one even thanked me. I was dumbstruck. So I want to say that there are a few take-home messages, which a couple of which didn't really appear to me till years later. One was, I went to traffic court the following week, and it was like a deli. You had to get a number. There were hundreds of people at traffic court. And as I waited, I would see somebody go up who had 10 tickets or $300 of fine, and the judge said, 30 days, jail time. I was like, oh, this was not the issue of which I was willing to be arrested and go to jail. You know, I had principles, but I had a citation. I saw several people get jail time, and then I thought, wow, you know, what's going to happen? Fortunately, I got a fine. I was able to pay it. So the take home, I didn't end up being in jail with the people I've been feeding at the soup kitchen. The second thing was the 2 cannonballs I shellacked, and I used as bookends in my apartment for the whole rest of my time in the Bronx. And the third take-home was I never really ever thought about my family's Thanksgiving in the same way again.
Thank you so much, Lianne. Our next storyteller is Sue Schmidt. And does anyone here listen to The Moth? Yeah. Well, yeah. Sue actually runs The Moth in Burlington, Vermont. And I was so proud last month when I was listening to The Moth. Sue came on with a story that she actually first told here at the Mudroom. So... now, when I asked Sue what her favorite holiday is, she said that any time when all her family comes together is a holiday. Please welcome Sue. Thanks. That's perfect. Thanks.
So my holiday disaster actually gave birth to the most extraordinary act of bravery I have ever seen in my life. The year was 1976. I had become a drummer the year before in my middle school. This was a big deal in the 70s to be a girl drummer. And my second year as a drummer, I became the first chair of the drum line. And I can remember Mr. Stentz, our middle school band teacher, sitting down with me on the first day and saying to me, the most important thing of being the first chair as a drummer is no matter what happens, keep going. And he had this kind of earnest look on his face, which also held a little bit of disappointment, because he had lived a life of compromise at that point, as most middle school band instructors did. This was not the destination. This was like a rest stop on the way to his destination. But for me, Mr. Stentz was the coolest man I had ever met. I can remember he had kind of long flowing hair, and he wore blue jeans and those vests that had little suede on the side of them. He was cool. I loved Mr. Stentz. And so I took my first chair responsibility very seriously. And the other first chairs was my friend Patty Napolitano, who was first chair of the horn section, and David Stuckety, who was exactly who you would picture to be as an oboe player in middle school. And so the three of us would meet regularly, and we would talk about all the things we were going to do as the first chair. But let's face it, it's middle school, and it's frickin' chaos. So none of the things that we really want to implement happen, but for the most part, it's going along pretty smoothly. Until Joey Hagzan joins the band. Joey Hagzan was the class bully, and he didn't join the band voluntarily. It was actually a consequence for what we fondly refer to as the suspension trifecta. And this was the day that Joey had lit a roll of toilet paper on fire in the boys' bathroom, and then tried to flush it down the toilet, creating a flood. And then as we were evacuating, says to the assistant principal on the way out of the building, "I think there's a bomb in the bathroom." Thus creating a flood, a fire, and a bomb threat all in one day. And his consequence was, you can be suspended, or you can join the band as a tuba player. And his parents felt like that was a better consequence. So Joey comes in, and it's hell from the first day he's there. He is tormenting every kid in the band. At one point, he takes the head off the timpani and puts a dead fish inside. And it smells so bad, it takes a week for the janitor to finally find this thing. So this goes on for about a month. And finally, Patty and David and I go to Mr. Sentz and say, "This is untenable. You need to get rid of him. He doesn't deserve to be here. He doesn't even want to be here." And Mr. Stentz looks at us and said, "You know what? Bullies will always exist. You're going to just have to learn how to deal with it." And I can remember my heart just kind of breaking a little bit, because I was like, "That's all you got, Mr. Cool? Like, that's it? We're just on our own here? Nobody gave us this in the briefing when we became the first chairs." So a couple months go by, and Mr. Stentz decides that he, for the Christmas concert, is going to bring together the middle school chorus and the middle school band. This is a feat that no other middle school music director has ever attempted, but he's going to do it. And the thing that Mr. Stentz doesn't know is that the PTO is going to feed the band and the chorus before the performance. And so backstage, I watch while David Stuckedy shoves as many candy canes in his mouth as he can, and then wipes his lips, to the point where when he goes to play his first tuning B-flat note, he gets stuck in that position. So pretty much for the rest of the night, Joey's just playing a B-flat. And I watched Joey Hagzan eat more pigs and blankets and cheese doodles than I ever thought humanly possible. And so we stock up, and the concert starts, and it's going along okay. And then we get to the finale, and the finale is the 12 Days of Christmas. And we get to the second day, and right when there's a pause, Joey lets out this little burp. And it's the kind of burp that you can smell something bad's gonna go down here. And so we get to the 5th day of Christmas. 5 golden, and Joey opens his mouth, and projectile vomit comes out right into the bell of Patty Napolitano's French horn. And it's got this like kind of neon glow to it because of the cheese doodles, and this smell just wafts back. And because I'm on the drum line, I'm standing up and I can see this, and my instincts just go out the window, and I stop. And as soon as I stop, the whole drum line stops. And when the drum line stops, the horn section stops. And when the horn section stops, the woodwind section stops. And then now all you can hear is just David Stuckedy's like one B-flat note. And I look up, and Mr. Stentz is like panicked, and he's doing that international sign that middle school music teachers do, which is like, keep going, keep going. And like years of music education is just dripping off him with beads of sweat. And finally, he makes eye contact with me. And it's not the kind of eye contact that you want from an adult. It's like desperation eye contact. And it's not like a student to a teacher. It's not like an adult to a child. In that moment, it's musician to musician. And he looks at me like, please help me. And I know what I need to do. And so I start to play. Triplet, triplet, paradiddle, paradiddle, triplet, triplet, paradiddle, paradiddle, drum roll. And when I stop, the rest of the drum section is with me. And the horn section starts in. And then the woodwind section starts in. And we pull this together. And I am like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm first chair. And then it happens. And in an act of bravery I have never seen again, Patty Napolitano takes 2 fingers, and she holds them on the bell of her French horn, and she dips out as much vomit as she can, and she begins to blow. And shards of this neon vomit just fly out of the bell of her French horn all over Joey Hagzan's shirt. And I'm like, this is a Christmas miracle. And in that moment, we take back the band. I think about that concert every year at this time. And I'm so thankful for Patty Napolitano, who ended up becoming the CEO of some Fortune 500 company. And Mr. Stentz, who just a few years ago retired after 40 years as a music teacher. And even Joey Hagzan, who I heard found Jesus in the place where most bullies find him, at the Dannemore Correctional Facility. Because that year, I learned that bullies exist. But if we stick together, sometimes we can find the strength when they vomit in our direction to blow that shit back and keep going. Thank you.
So I believe we're going to do the story from the audience first.
Yeah. Should we also announce the theme for the next?
We did. It's Under the Influence, and I want you to be really creative. We don't want all addiction stories, okay? I mean, you know, you could be under the influence of love, power, your friends, you know, so be creative. But you know, addiction stories are fine too, but I mean, we don't want all drunken stories. So. And you're up.
Salam alaikum. You maybe know those words. We sort of took leave of our senses, I think, and we decided to live and work overseas. My wife and I both served in the Peace Corps, and so there's lots of stories there, but that's not where I'm going right now. I'm taking you to Saudi Arabia, and we were invited to join this first co-ed university campus in that country. Pretty progressive, miraculous thing that it is, and we were honored, really, to be there. And as a first-year teacher in an international environment, you just never know what each day is going to bring when you have 100 nationalities in your community and 80 nationalities in the school. So any number of greetings were happening, any number of things were happening and being interpreted or misinterpreted by any number of people at any given time. So it was starting out as a fairly typical day of school in kindergarten. And kindergarten is really where you learn most of what you need to know for the rest of your life. And I was, I think, into third period, something like that. And we had a new girl join us. Her parents had just come from North Carolina. And she was just a little spit of love. And half of the class had gone, as they usually do, to Islamic studies class. They do that once a week, sort of like catechism in school, but for Muslims. Right? So they had this period, and they came back, and they sort of settled, and we were sitting in the circle, and it was a beautiful circle, and the new student has lots of questions, and she goes, "Where did y'all come from anyway?" You know, and so, you know, Rahman says, "Well, we were learning about Allah. We were learning about the Quran. You know, it's very reverent." And she goes, "Oh yeah? Well, who do you pray to anyway?" And I was like, okay, well, I'm sort of facilitating this conversation of international multicultural exchange, and you know, and pretty good. So my Unitarianness was coming through. And I said, "Well, we pray to Allah." Rahman said, "My daddy says that doesn't matter. You're all going to hell anyway." I said, "This was not in the guidebook. I was looking through the material here, and I was trying to figure out, And then Rahman starts to cry because he does not want to go to the burning hell. I do not want to go to the burning hell. He's upset. I'm like, oh. Well, I'll call her Anne. Anne, you know, some of us believe in Allah. Some of us believe in God. You know, we believe in different things, and that's okay. The tension's going down a little bit in the room. And, but Mr. Chris, what about me? I believe in many gods. See? We all believe in different things. See? Mr. B over here, he believes in... I said, for instance, this is where the holiday part comes in. How many of you believe in Santa Claus? Half of the Muslim hands go up. Half of the non-Muslim hands go up. And I said, see, we all believe in different things, right? And so they were pretty satisfied with that. And we moved on through the day. Now, it was the holiday season, and that evening, one of our intercultural, multicultural experiences was to bring Christmas caroling to our gated Saudi compound in Saudi Arabia, literally in the middle of the desert on the Red Sea. And we used the Halloween map of the Western households to plan our caroling route. Now you can imagine this, going to the wrong house might be problematic because, earlier in the year, my daughter was pulled down because she decided as a third grader that it was fun to dance to jazz music in the park. So we wanted to plan our route. And so we planned our route, and then we had great fun because we visited colleagues, and the Canadians opened the door, hey, come on in, yeah, we're got, sing. We actually sort of chose songs that were relatively neutral, Jingle Bells as opposed to the first Noel, so that sort of thing. And so on our PC way, we inadvertently ended up at one of the wrong houses. So this might have been a disaster, right? Well, not really. We knocked on the door. There was commotion and lots of people behind the door. We don't know. We get ready. With the choir director from the community, because we did have a choir there. We did all kinds of things behind closed doors, which was fine. We start singing. I even forget the song. Maybe Jingle Bells, something pretty innocuous. One boy appears at the door, and then another head, and another head, and another head, and another head. And they're all... Papa, I think the pizza's here. Thank you.
Oh, good. Our next storyteller is Hilde Ojibway. Oh, thank you, God. We asked Hilde what her favorite holiday is, and it is Thanksgiving. Food and family. That's what makes her happy. Here you go, Hilde.
Oh, I'm so short. There you go. Before I start my story, a little announcement. At the end, when everyone's getting ready to leave, I'm doing double duty tonight, and I'm playing with the band. We're going to do Christmas songs. If you want to sing along on your way out, you're welcome to do that. So my story takes place in 1975. I was 18 years old. What a great age, right? I was getting ready to start at Michigan State University my first year. I would be home, living at home for reasons you'll figure out later. And my sister was also getting married that fall, so it was a pretty exciting time. My parents had 11 children. I was number 5 out of 11. And at the time when I was 18 years old, there were 8 of us. Yeah, there were 8 of us living at home and a couple away. The youngest one in the family was named Clint, or Clinty. And when you have 11 kids, your kids are pretty much free range, I think, unless you're very wealthy and can afford a lot of support. Clint took free range to another level. Not only did he wander around, but he was always in character. So he would dress up as various things. One of my favorite was when he was the undersea explorer, which meant he had flippers on and goggles and was playing in the backyard pool. We had a church right behind us. When he heard the church music playing, all bets were off. Because he had an invisible friend there named Jesus. He really did. He went there all the time and played with his invisible friend, Jesus. So when he heard that music, he just took off, and they're in the middle of service, and the door swings open, and he's thump, 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 thump down the aisle in his flippers and glasses. That's the kind of kid Clint was. A few days before his 8th birthday, he was running, playing this game, like running and running around the car, like, you can't catch me. And even though I was a really fit 18-year-old kid, I really couldn't catch him. He was really quick. Finally, he gave up on that chase race, and he jumped in the car, and then his next race was which side of the car he was going to be on, peeking back and forth. As the car pulled away, though, I thought, I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe this. That little boy is going to be completely wiped out in about a week. He's going through a bone marrow transplant. In 1975, they didn't do bone marrow transplants on kids, so he was a medical experiment. So why would a family subject a kid to a medical experiment? Only if you knew what the consequences looked like. 5 years before, my 15-year-old brother had died of leukemia. The doctors were seeing a pattern in our family, and they realized that my little brother was headed for the same fate. So for this reason, he was enrolled in this incredible experiment. Changed the world. My fall wasn't like a normal university student. I would get on my bike and I'd go off to classes at MSU, and then I'd come home, and then I'd oftentimes ride my bike to the hospital where I would scrub. Has anybody ever been an OR doc? OR nurse? That's what I did at 18 years old. Every day I scrubbed for OR because I was going into an isolation unit with my brother, and I'd hang out with him for a few hours. And even though it wasn't a good situation by any stretch of the imagination being the key word, he and I had amazing imagination, so we really made the best of a pretty bad situation. We had told him that he would be home before the snow fell. Well, no, he wouldn't be home before the snow. He would be out of the hospital. Again, if you have a bone marrow transplant, you do not go from the hospital to home. Your home is too germy. Our home took germs to like the graduate PhD level, and there was no way he was coming back to that house. I was the oldest kid at home, so that meant I was going to have an 8-year-old roommate come Christmas time, the two of us. He would be recovering from the bone marrow transplant, and I would be his primary caregiver at the age of 18. One of the nurses was named Merry Christmas, and we took that as a good sign. But it didn't work. He died 5 days before Thanksgiving. I knew this would be hard to get through. I went with my parents. You know, like I said, I wasn't like a normal 18-year-old. I went with my parents to the funeral home, and I remember the funeral director saying, "Oh, this is going to be tough. You know, a coffin for a kid on a weekend and before the holidays. I don't know, this is going to be tough." I want you to think, though, there was a casket in that funeral home that was red, white, and blue, ready for the bicentennial. But, you know, really, thank God they didn't have a lot of coffins for kids. Excuse me. People that we didn't even know kind of came out of the woodwork around that time. I remember we came home and there was a box of food on our porch. I think it was from the Kiwanis Clubs or Lions or something like that. We got sympathy from cards from people we had no idea who they were. So we were forging ahead, and the snow was falling. Just about 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas, there was this other thing that happened, which is really the good part of the story. First of all, let me back up. Besides the joy of my sister's wedding, which was a good thing, and the horror of a transplant gone wrong for a child, my father also had health issues. He had a brain tumor which was classified as benign, but that only meant it wasn't cancerous. So it didn't save him from having seizures, loss of vision, violent mood swings. Violent mood swings didn't happen have to happen often enough to just change the tone of the family. He did have brain surgery, but that didn't go well. He did survive, though, but his brain damage was such that it was pretty apparent he was never going to return to work. But no one ever, if you've ever seen anyone become disabled, you know there's not a point where they say, today's the day you're disabled and you don't go back to work. You know, you live thinking you're going to get back on your feet, but he never did return to work. But anyway, that year he was still on the payroll, so he got a $150 holiday bonus, which was great because, as you might imagine, between the medical bills and the funeral expenses, we were broke. After my mom cashed the check, I went into the dining room. I say dining room loosely. It had a dining room table, but it was also served as the laundry folding table, the desk, just everything. It was kind of a chaotic space. And she was just throwing things around. And then finally she just collapsed on the table and she started crying and said, that's it, I've lost it. We don't have any Christmas, I've lost it, we'll have nothing. Christmas is over. And I'm like, I felt like I was in a bubble, because frankly, Christmas was already over, Mom. I mean, you lose your little brother, your dad's going crazy, like, I don't really care about presents and stockings, but obviously she did, and obviously when she was saying, I've lost it, there was a lot more going on to that $150. The phone rang, and it was an adult on the other end of the line, which is wonderful, because as an 18-year-old kid, I was only so helpful. The person on the other end of the line was Susie Peterson. Susie's son had been in the hospital the same time as my brother. Now, nobody interacted with my brother. It was like this weird unit at the end of the hall. Everyone had to, keep the doors shut. But she knew what was going on behind there, and she really took an interest in our family and my mom. So Susie kept calling to see how we were doing. So my mom told her how we were doing. Not so good. She just blew Christmas. And then I was just relieved she had an adult to talk to. The next day, there was my mom crying again. Only when she had her head down on the table, but when she looked up at me, she was smiling, and she was holding an envelope in her hand. And she goes, oh my God, I found it. It was here the whole time. I was just crazy. I don't know what was going on. And I was like, okay, great. Well, then the phone rang. It was the bank. Someone from the bank called and said, Mrs. Ojibway, well, according to our records, you cashed a check here yesterday for $150, and well, someone found $150 here at the bank, and we want to get that back to you because we're sure that's your money. And my mom was like, sure, I'll come right down. She hung up the phone and she looked at me and she said, Susie Peterson is up to some good stuff. So she went to the bank. Sure enough, the bank employee, when confronted with my mother's version of the story, said, oh, okay, right. It was actually an anonymous donor who presented this and wanted our cooperation to get it to you. So my mom and Susie got together, and my mom said, it's really nice of you, but I can't keep this money. I mean, you collected it. Oh, I tell you how she got it. She went to the church that night. She had a meeting. She was a real do-gooder kind of person. And a good Christian, too, and truly a good Christian, not someone who just says they're Christian. I'm not naming names, you all know. But all these people had pitched in the money, so that's where it came from, the people at the church. So also at that same church, they had a tradition on Christmas Eve of collecting gifts and placing them on the manger, which was set up on the altar, and these gifts would be distributed to needy mothers. So my mom and Susie bought a bunch of gifts for needy mothers. And I can assure you that in 14 years, my mother never got to go out shopping like that for a new baby. So that Christmas, I have no memory whatsoever of gifts, stockings, dinner, nothing. All I remember is a look on my mom's face as she walked and placed those gifts on the altar. Now I grew up to be somewhat normal. If any of you know me, I'm a full-time do-gooder. I'm a professional do-gooder. So listen, Good Neighbor, Headrest, a whole bunch of organizations I've been the director of. So what have I been doing? I've been getting meals to people who are needy, holiday baskets to people, getting folks in addiction treatment, getting people free medical care. So, and for me, I think that a lot of that comes from the darkest times of people reaching out. People I still to this day don't know who all those people were, but I want to assure you that you're going to be approached by the holidays and many other times during your life. And just, you cannot imagine what a difference it makes to someone when you help out a little bit. It makes a lifetime of difference. One last thing, a little off, but I do music, as I said. This last summer, the Norris Cotton Cancer Center asked if we'd play for a picnic for the BMT. And I'm like, yeah, Norris Cancer, I'll do anything for them. The day before we went to play, I thought, wow, well, what is the BMT group anyway? Bone marrow transplant survivors. And there's lots of them.
Thank you, Hilde. Great story. Our next storyteller is Mike Lovell, who's one of my teammates here at the Mudroom. And when I asked Mike what his favorite holiday was, it was the 4th of July. But he doesn't like fireworks. I don't get it. But Mike?
This is a story about a Christmas that I really wanted to be special. And it was the first family Christmas that I ever hosted up at my house in New Hampshire. I wanted it to be really special because I didn't like driving to Connecticut, and I was hoping we'd always do Christmases up in New Hampshire. And I convinced my family that we should do Christmas in New Hampshire because it would be a nice white Christmas, and the air is crisp, and we can go skiing the next day, and there's we'll go ice skating and do all kinds of great stuff like that. And I also had these 2 international students from my college who were staying with me over the holidays, and I wanted to show them a traditional American family Christmas. My family didn't need ideology to get into arguments. Our first fight of this Christmas was over cheese. Apparently, I had neglected to provide the proper kind of cheese for us to have a Merry Christmas, and my family didn't really find it unreasonable to send me up from the table out into the night to find fresh grated Parmesan cheese on Christmas Eve. So I'm driving around to all the local gas stations. None of them had the cheese. And I'm driving back to the house, and I realize that I'm not really that anxious to get back there. So I start driving slower and slower. I'm trying to prolong the drive. And after a while, I realize I'm going about walking speed. I'm actually thinking to myself, I wonder if I can get pulled over for driving too slow when I see this deer standing on the side of the road. And I swear, I'm going so slow, I don't even have to hit the brakes to avoid it. I just took my foot off the accelerator. I slowed down to about 2 miles an hour, and I'm going to go around this deer. And just as I get even with the deer, bam! It jumps off the side of the road and slams into the side of my truck. So I get out of my truck and I look at the deer, and the deer its breathing is really labored. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this deer is dying. This deer's gonna die. And I don't know what to do, so I think, I gotta go call the police. I gotta get the police out here. We gotta put this deer out of its misery. So I go running up to the nearest house. And it's got Christmas lights on. It's Christmas Eve, and I go up to the door, but the house is dark. It's Christmas Eve. No one's home. Everyone's off at their families' houses. So I pound on the door. There's no one there. I run down to the next house, and same thing. I pound on the door. There's no one there. I run down the street a little bit, and there's this trailer. It wouldn't have been my first choice to pound on the door, but I can see the blue glow of a TV set. And so I know there's someone home. And I go running up the steps. The trailer's kind of set at this funny angle, not a very nice trailer, and it's got these homemade steps going up in front of it. It's just made out of 2 pieces of wood with boards nailed up between them. And I'm walking up the steps, but they're all icy and slippery. And just as I get to the top step, my shoe, I'm wearing these slide-on shoes, goes jetting off my foot and goes under the crawl space of the house. And I'm thinking like, oh. And as I get to the step, I hear from inside, come on in. I'm like, oh, I can't go in with one shoe on and one bare foot. The guy will think I'm a weirdo. So I go diving under the crawl space. I don't think it's going to take that long to find my shoe under the crawl space, and I'm feeling around under there, but I can't find the thing. And then I hear from upstairs again, come on in. I'm like, oh no, this is disaster. What am I going to do? And I'm crawling around underneath someone else's crawl space. There's all kinds of trash under there. There's garden hoses and there's lawnmower wheels, and I can't find my shoe. I'm going way deep underneath this trailer. I'm looking for the shoe. I'm thinking I'm never going to find this shoe. Finally, I hear one more time, come on in. And right around then, I find my shoe. And I go walking out from the trailer. I put it on, and I walk up the steps. I'm thinking, I guess I shouldn't knock. The guy said, come on in 3 times, but it was kind of a while since the last come on in. I opened the door, I walked in, and at first I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy wasn't talking to me. He must have been talking to the TV or something, or maybe it was on the TV, because he doesn't even look at me. He's sitting on the couch. He's completely naked. There's a naked guy sitting on the couch, and he doesn't turn to look at me, so I'm thinking I'm going to back out of here, and I'm going to knock on the door and give him a chance to put a bathrobe on and answer the door. But before I could do that, he goes, come on in. And then he scooches over on the couch. It's a gray leather couch, and if you want to paint a picture in your head, he was a very big guy. There were lots of rolls. He had gray hair, but the hair on his back was really dark. He scooches over, he pats the couch, and he goes, sit down. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to sit down. And so I start telling him, I hit a deer outside. I need your phone. I just need your phone. I need your phone, and I'll leave. And he goes, sit down, relax. I'm like, no, I'm not going to relax. And so he tells me where the phone is. I go over to the phone. He gets up. He goes, you want some coffee? I'm like, no, this isn't like a social visit. Before this, I didn't actually know he was naked. He could have been wearing a thong. But no, he was definitely naked. And he's getting up and he's making me coffee. I make the phone call. I call the police. I tell him where the deer is. And I tell this guy, look, I got to go outside and wait by the deer. He goes, oh, it's cold out there. Why don't you just wait in here? I'm like, no, I kind of don't want to wait in here. And, because I can't see. I can't see outside. So he goes, well, just turn on the outside light. So I go and I look at the outside light, and it's duct taped with like 30 pieces of duct tape in the off position. So when I first started knocking on doors, I was expecting to walk in on a family wearing Christmas sweaters, maybe about to sing a carol. I might have actually been secretly fantasizing that they were going to invite me into their family Christmas. I never really expected to find such a strange Christmas tableau as this naked guy. So when I got back to the house without the cheese, I was really, really pissed at my family. And they go, so did you get the cheese? I'm like, no, I didn't get the cheese. They're like, well, where have you been? I was like, oh, I hit a deer. And they go, you hit a deer? Where's the deer? I'm like, the deer's on the side of the road in Sunapee. And they go, well, why didn't you bring it home? I'm like, well, because it's Christmas Eve, and I didn't want to be gutting a deer on Christmas Eve. They go, well, you got to go get that deer. I'm like, no, I'm not going to get the deer. No, they're like, you got to go get that deer right now before someone else steals it. I'm like, I can't. I don't have an excuse to not go. So I say, I don't even have a knife. And my wife looks down at the table and picks up her serrated steak knife and goes, well, here, use this one. So she hands me this steak knife. And they send me out the door, and before they do, my dad goes, and take these two. And he's pointing to the two Japanese exchange students who, my parents grew up during World War II. I never would have guessed that they had anything against Japanese people, but apparently they did. And they were making the whole dinner, I wasn't there to defend them, I guess really awkward for these two very sweet Japanese girls. And so we all go off. The girls were more than happy to leave the table. We all go off to dress out a deer on the side of the road. And we pull up to it. We're looking at it. I'm asking them if they have ever gutted a deer before. They said no. We're going to do this in the car headlights. And as we're working on it, are kind of shifting it around, we see naked guy's light turn on. So I know this light was duct taped off. So I'm thinking, this guy is springing into action. I'm now worried that he's going to show up wearing like nothing but a winter coat and a pair of boots. And my goal for these two sweet girls is been lowered from showing them a wonderful family traditional Christmas to just not traumatizing them. So I tell them, we got to get out of here. So we try to throw this deer into the back of the car, but if you've ever tried to throw a dead animal into the back of a pickup truck, it's really hard. Gravity just tries to make the thing just kind of squid back out of your truck. So we're trying really hard, and it actually got kind of comical. I'm wearing a pair of slippers, and it's all icy, and I fell backwards onto my butt, and the deer comes flying over me, and its head goes clunking onto the ice. It makes a really sickening sound. And Japanese girl number 1 checks out of the whole experience at that point. She's no longer a participant. She goes into the car. She starts to cry. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is bad. But the second Japanese girl, Namako, is a trooper, and we wrestle the deer into the back of my truck. And we take it and we drive off. And I don't know, I'm not going to take this deer to my own house. We're doing dinner at my house, but my family has a lake house, which is where we're going to do Christmas Day. So I think, well, I'll take it to the lake house. So we drive to the lake house, and Namako and I slide this deer down the front yard, and we turn on the front light. And I have Namako hold the deer underneath the shoulders. She, at this point, starts to weep. She maybe thought up until now that we're taking this deer to the hospital. She's petting the deer's head, trying to comfort it, and I take out the serrated steak knife, and I try to cut into the deer, but the knife just wasn't sharp enough. And Namako's holding it, and finally I just give it everything I got, and I just stick that knife into the deer's stomach. And the deer was full of blood, and the blood came just gushing out of this deer, and it splashes against me, and it splashes all over Namako. And she had her eyes closed. She opens her eyes, and all I see is the whites of her eyes and this blood-red face. It was a mess. Yeah, so the whole procedure went about like that. When we were done, there was this huge red blood spot in the front yard. I'm thinking, this is going to be gruesome on Christmas morning. So I try to disperse it. I'm walking around it. There's snow on the ground. I'm kicking the snow, trying to make the blood maybe disappear in the snow, but it never got any less blood red. It just spread out over a bigger area. And then we're going to get into my truck to go home, and I'm looking at Namako. She's covered with blood. I don't even want her in my truck. So I make her roll in the snow, and I roll in the snow too to try to get some of the blood off ourselves. And we go home. The next morning, Namako and Kanako, they were pretty traumatized, and they really didn't want to participate in Christmas, so they kind of stayed at my house, and I drove to the family lake house. And when I got there, I was pretty surprised at the mess. They were all pretty mad at me, my family. They were like, what the hell happened here? I was like, you guys told me to, dress out a deer. And they were pretty angry. The yard was kind of a mess. The body prints that we left, the bloody body prints, didn't make it look less like a murder scene. And we didn't really have a white Christmas, I guess. The houses are pretty close together there, though, and I couldn't help but notice that the blood-stained front yard matched the color of the coat of the next-door neighbor's plastic Santa Claus perfectly.
Thanks, Mike. That was quite a story. Our next storyteller, Kevin Gallagher. Kevin has, I asked him what his favorite holiday was. It's the holiday, correct, Kevin? Come on up and let's talk about that because he needs to tell you this. He's a great storyteller too, so. So what is an holiday?
So my mother-in-law goes to Florida, usually around end of October every year. So we have a 3-day weekend where we have every holiday from Halloween to Mother's Day and any birthday that occurs during that time in 72 hours. Complete with decorations, gifts. The kids love it. It's a lot of candy. And so that's the holiday. And I think the reason I like it, it's very efficient. It's very efficient. I would suggest it for people who don't like to drag decorations up and down. Just one day. Just do them all in one day. All right. So when I was in graduate school, I read, to become a psychotherapist, I read a book. I actually read more than one book. But I read a book by Monica McGoldrick called Ethnicity and Family Therapy. And every chapter of the book was a different ethnic group. And Monica wrote about the challenges that ethnicity would have as a patient in psychotherapy. So, of course, I go right to the Irish chapter, because I'm Irish, and I want to see, like, oh, what are they saying about my people? And to sum it up, they said that the Irish are mostly positive people, but that they expect bad things to happen to them all the time. And I thought, well, I just thought that was Catholic. I didn't think that that was Irish, you know, because if you're sinning all the time, then you should expect punishment all the time. But you know, I guess we're sort of a happy, hopeless crowd, which explains like the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like no one looks for it because there is no end of the rainbow, you know, so happy but hopeless. Well, I really knew that I was Irish. I came into that epiphany of, you know, mostly positive but expect bad things to happen the year that I turned 10. Now, to set the stage, when I was 10, I was far more adorable than I am now. I had brown hair and freckles. Now I have gray hair and wrinkles. But I was so excited to become 10. 2 digits. I would be 2 digits to my death. You know, I sort of thought like I'm really grown up, you know, the amazing aging process. But the year I turned 10, or the actual day I turned 10, we were on Lake Bomazeen in Vermont on family vacation. My family lived in D.C., and a number of families, 3 or 4 families, would come up for a week or two's vacation every summer. And on my birthday, the plan was, this was my birthday present, to learn how to water ski. I thought it was sort of a cheap way out of my birthday. But I was confused by this because I had never expressed any interest in water skiing, ever. And it's not like I would drive by the Potomac, you know, with a tear running down my cheek, just wishing I could water ski around the monuments. And so I wasn't that excited about it, but the morning of my birthday, I think the decision was probably fueled by alcohol on the adult level. But the morning, everyone was at the beach, the assembly of elders, and then the audience of children. And there was a big discussion about how I was going to get out of the water. Now, I guess there's 3 typical ways that you start water skiing, if that's even the right way to say it. You can either like have your skis on and be on the shore and the boat takes off and you go. Or you can do the sit on the dock method, and then when the boat goes, you know, you get a splinter ass, and then you water ski. But then there's the sort of more usual way where you float in the water with your skis like this and the rope in between and your life jacket like this, so you can't talk or see. And that was the way they decided to do it. So I'm floating in the water, you know, the boat goes, I hop out of the water, I'm water skiing. I immediately let go because I don't know what to do. And I didn't get up again for 2 more years. So my association with my birthday that year and with water skiing is that it's just an alternative way to drink a lot of lake water, because I often didn't let go when I fell. The rest of the summer went sort of as expected, but then school started. I'm in 5th grade when I'm 10. My teacher is Sister Immaculata, and she is very well known in the school. Mind you, I said well known, not popular. She was a tall, sturdy woman, you know, full habit, so the whipple and the bandeau and the veil and the bib. To complete the look, she had pursed lips and a stern face and glasses that made her eyeballs this big. She was a piece of work. But she had a great love for geography and penmanship. So that's all I remember doing in 5th grade was writing out our geography book on yellow-lined paper with pencil. She also had a thing about smudges on your paper. So when you're left-handed, that's a huge concern. And you saw the punishment that ensued when people had smudges on their paper. It was usually the ruler on the hand. So I made it, you know, first couple of months in this class, doing quite fine until Halloween. Now, on Halloween, we did not have to wear our uniforms. We could wear a costume. And I've never been a fan of Halloween. So I've had the same costume my whole life for Halloween, which is a grandfather. That's what I go as. Yeah. Creativity would not be my, you know, in my gene pool. So I would wear my grandfather's cap and a corncob pipe, and I would take a cork and burn one end of it and give myself a 5 o'clock shadow, and then I would wear a plaid red and black jacket of my father's and roll up the sleeves. Well, that particular jacket was large enough and the sleeves were thick enough that that was a smudge day for me. So that was the day that my knuckles met the Board of Discipline, as we called it. And so that was my happy memory from Halloween, the year I turned 10. Positive, but expect bad things to happen. Well, we careened into Thanksgiving, which is normally a festive time in my family. But my dad decided to take Irish to a new level in terms of his drinking. And so he was very drunk and very abusive that night, to the point that my mother decided this would be a good night to end our marriage. But, you know, when a mother does that, she tends to take the kids with her. So we left and went to her father's house, another drunk Irishman. But he was, but he was the other kind. He was like sort of the miserable, silent version of the, you know, just cranky all the time. Always with his coffee mug that he would replenish in the cupboard in the pantry in the back room with coffee. That helped keep him in a solid state of coma. And he had 14 children, which was always confusing to all of us because he didn't seem like he was anyone who liked people. So it seemed like an awful lot of people to make if you don't like people. But having an extended family that large meant that there was a great emphasis that Christmas to make sure that me and my sisters had a really good Christmas, because things were just such a mess in the family. My favorite aunt and her husband and their kids came to stay at my grandfather's for Christmas weekend. And my cousin Marianne, she was 2 years older than me, 12, which I thought was the age of wisdom. I couldn't wait to get there. We were sitting in the front parlor by the tree, trying to guess what we were getting for Christmas. The adults were all drinking and smoking in the kitchen. And Marianne said the strangest thing. She said, "Well, do you still believe in Santa Claus?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean still believe? Like, you don't believe?" And she's like, "No, I don't believe in Santa Claus." Now, I have to say, I had been suspicious for a while. The Easter Bunny started it at like around 8.5 or 9. Like, I thought, what are the chances of a mutant rabbit that can move around like a human, and their job is to bring candy to Christian children one night a year. Like, it just sort of seemed it didn't make much sense. Or the tooth fairy, you know, like little Tinkerbell has money, you know, like money, and she wants children's dead teeth. Like, it's just, like, it seems sort of macabre to me. But I didn't want to think that there was no Santa. So I said, well, how do you know there's no Santa Claus? And she said, well, because your mother buys all the presents. Like, tomorrow, you look on the presents, and it will say, to Kevin, love Santa, and that will be your mother's handwriting. And so I wanted to ask my mother, but I didn't want, you know, confirm or deny. I sort of didn't want to know, because I knew it was going to, like, take me out. I just sort of thought, this is just going to be the worst Christmas ever. And so a couple hours passed, and I said, you know, Mom, you know, is there any real Santa? And she said, oh, of course, honey, there is. Why do you say that? And I said, well, Marianne told me that there wasn't, that it's you. And she said, oh, she's pulling your leg. She's just trying to get a rise out of you, honey. Don't listen to her. So I felt sort of temporarily relieved until my Uncle Rob grabbed my cousin Marianne, spanked her, dragged her into the bathroom, and washed her mouth out with ivory soap. And I thought, oh, there isn't a Santa Claus. Because you don't get in that kind of trouble in my family unless you've done something really bad. So the rest of the year went quite similarly, you know. I did win the Easter egg hunt at our church, which was pretty good for a non-believer, I thought. And I wonder, you know, positive, but expect bad things to happen. I'm still sort of that same person. But, you know, I think of the challenge of being a kid when you always want to be so grown up, and that things will be better when you're grown up. But then I think when you're a grown up, you look back and you sort of think, there are some parts about being a kid that are just really quite amazing. Thanks.
Well, that completes another mudroom. We look forward to seeing you in March, and remember, it's Under the Influence. And I guess go to our website, it'll have the deadline and all that, but get creative, and everybody has a story about being under the influence, admit it. So see you then. Thank you very much.